Welcome back to Reflections, and I'm going to just run through a few examples here. And the first one I'm going to run through is pretty straightforward, but I'm going to throw a whole bunch of stuff at you at the same time. Now I know where my grid's going to beam up here in a moment, so I'm going to write my example over on this side. Suppose we are asked to graph the following function. And let's say we put a negative sign in front of the y, and we're going to find x, put a negative sign in front of the x. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Now, let's just get rid of the title here. Don't really need it. And let's bring in the grid. Okay, so what are we going to do here? Well, if I put a negative sign in front of the x, that means I'm reflecting across the y-axis. And if I put a negative sign in front of the y, then I'm going to be reflecting across the x-axis. So here was my original graph. Okay, it went through 1, 1, and then 4, 2. This is the original graph. Okay, and when I say the original, I'm talking about good old square root of x. Now I want to reflect it across both the x and the y-axis. Where am I going to end up? Well, it means if I look at certain key points, 1, 1 is now going to be at 1, negative 1, but that's only reflecting across the x-axis. Same thing with 4, 2. It's now down here at 4, negative 2. But then I've got to take these guys and also reflect them across the y-axis. So they're going to end up over here. So let's see if we can frame all that in. And there's my graph. Okay, so basically it's just a double reflection. Nothing to it. Be warned, the question could have been written like this. You know, if I wanted to, I could have made the right side have a whole bunch of negatives. And the first thing I would have done is brought that negative over here on the left side so I can treat them both the same way. All right, let's clear the screen and look at another example. Let's say you have this function here, f of x equals, and you've got 4x cubed minus 5x squared plus 10x minus 1. Okay, we're going to do two things to that function. We're going to reflect it, reflect across the x-axis. Okay, now what would it look like? Well, the first thing I have to notice is, if I'm reflecting across the x-axis, that means I got to find the y's and put a negative sign in front of them. That's what's going to make this reflection happen. Now the y's, there's only one y, and it's where f of x is. So I'm going to put that. That y has now got a negative sign in front of it. The rest of this all looks exactly the same, but chances are you wouldn't leave your answer like that, or if it was, say, a multiple choice or something question, you wouldn't see that answer. More likely than not, the negative would have been multiplied into the other side. So this is more likely the way you'd see it written. So all I'm doing is multiplying the negative 1 to turn that positive, and then all these guys are going to get multiplied by negative 1, and you can see all the signs have to change. So there it is, reflecting across the x-axis. Now what about part B? What if I want to reflect across the y-axis? Okay, well this one's got a little bit more going on in a sense, because you got to find all your x's and put a negative sign in front of those, and it's a real good idea to write this with brackets around it, especially when they're being squared or cubed, and then it's much easier to know whether it's going to be positive or negative. So this is going to be 4 times, now, negative x cubed. Then I have minus 5 times what is now negative x squared, plus 10 times negative x, and then minus 1. Now we're going to just clean that up a little bit. This will stay as a negative x. When you cube it, it's still going to be negative, so this is negative 4x cubed. Now this negative x being squared turns into a positive, so it's just going to be staying put as minus 5x squared. And then this becomes a minus 10x, and then minus 1. There it is, totally with the reflection across the y-axis. Okay, let's clear the screen and look at my last example. In this example, let's say we have this function here. Y equals the square root of x minus 5. And we would like to reflect it across the y-axis. So we got to make the correct change so that it reflects across the y-axis. Okay, so we're going to make sure we do the right change. So that means across the y-axis, you got to find your x's wherever they may be and put a negative sign in front of them. Well, here's an x, and that's the only x inside the function there, so I got to find it, and I'm going to put a negative sign in front of that x. And I like to write it with brackets in case there's any other fancy stuff going on. In this case, there isn't really. Chances are you could just write it, though, like this. The brackets don't serve any great purpose. Whoops. Except that I lost my negative. There we go. All fixed. Okay. So with brackets or without brackets, that is our answer. And that's where I'm going to stop with our look at reflections.